or haven't seen her, or this is your first time coming here, my name is Ronnie. I am a donor egg mom in waiting. And what that means is I was told by my doctor that I needed donor eggs for a possible chance of bringing home a baby. So when I was looking for women that looked like me, they were in different groups. We aren't all on the same platform. We were all in this Facebook group. I found people on Instagram. I found people on YouTube. And so I took it upon myself to create a space. We started off as women of color who use donor eggs. We expanded from them, and then I changed the brand just to be, because I'm working on some things in the background to hopefully tackle all shades of infertility, not just, just egg donation, but affordability, donating your embryos, looking for an egg donor like Shantel. The two pain points that I get all the time is how can I afford this? And the second one is matching and wanting to be in touch with an egg donor, or just, where are they, that kind of thing. And so some kind of self-matching where you can maybe come up with your own contracts, even if they're with a clinic. So I'm working on solving those two pain points. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce Shantel. She is someone who I found on TikTok. I just went through looking for egg donors, looking for women of color. I just started doing all the hashtags and she popped up. I messaged her and she was gracious enough to come on, and I appreciate you. So probably the first question I'll ask is to tell your story. Did you have any infertility issues, and what made you want to be an egg donor?
You know what? I actually thankfully I never had any infertility issues. I have two kids of my own. They're 11 and 7. And I was like in a bind. I'm like, what do I need to get for? I don't really think I'm really keen on having any more kids right now. So I was just like, I'm perfectly healthy. I might as well help somebody. How it was presented to me was like, you get compensated for. I was like, okay, so it's a win-win. Somebody gets a kid that I don't have to raise, and I get some money. Can't beat that.
Right. And when you were going through the process, what all did it entail as far as if someone wanted to be an egg donor? What were the things that you had to do in order to get approved for the process?
I would say that the clinic that I took was a fairly simple process. They gave you a genetic testing. They gave you STD screenings, your just typical screenings and different markers just to make sure that you're healthy enough that you're not passing on, different genetic diseases to kids. So it was a fairly simple, just getting your blood drawn, going to the lab one time, getting your blood drawn, and then you go to, they send the lab to me because I had a family thing, I had to go out of town. So they sent the lab to me so they can get more testing just on my blood panels and just pretty much just making sure I'm healthy. I think that was probably the most intrusive thing, just the time commitment. I had to also get an ultrasound just to verify my womb and make sure that I was able to have eggs to donate. So that kind of all it was. I think that process, when I started, I started in December, and to get my blood drawn, all the records back, that took about 2 weeks, and I was ready to donate in their next cycle, January. I think it was the 15th or 20th. So from December, the middle of December to January, probably a month. And before I could get into their cycle.
Okay. And so for those of you who don't know, so clinics will do things based on basis, but the process is still the same. So some make you do a psych. Did you have to do a psych evaluation at all?
No, I didn't have to do that. They just asked me general psych screenings if I've ever had any intentions of harming myself, just those basic depression questions, see if you've ever felt like that. So I guess based on those answers, they would have probably dived more into what it was, but it was pretty standard.
Okay. So just so you know, if you do decide to do egg donation, you may actually, hey y'all, you may actually have to do those things. But blood drawing is one that's going to do ultrasound. They're going to test your what's called AMH. So they're going to see how many eggs you have. And then how old are you, if you mind me asking?
Oh, I'm 30.
So she's 30.
Yeah.
And at the time you donated, you were?
I was 29. So I was
29.
Yeah, about 6 months ago. So I donated fairly recently.
Okay. So usually they'll go, I think, up to 30, 32, but yeah. 29 is still a good age. Usually they'll like you to be in your late 20s. early 30s, that's usually your optimal peak of having the most eggs, the most healthiest eggs that you can have, when you're actually wanting to donate your eggs. So you did at a perfect age, and doing that. And so as far as being known and anonymous, did you have the choice of being known donor, or you was all anonymous?
I did chose, like, you know, if the kids did want to reach out to me to see where they came from, I did say yes, because, you know, I feel like even though I'm not your mom, it's very important to know where you genetically came from and how this person is. So it's like, okay, you know, I act like this, and it's basically a nature versus nurture type of thing. So I definitely want to give everybody the options to know who they are. So I definitely said yes to, if the kid, as they grew up, they wanted to know, I was okay with it.
And that's a good thing, because truthfully, you know, we're in a society, we're in a day where there's no true anonymous anymore.
Yeah.
You know, so if someone in your family decided to do a 23andMe or some kind of DNA testing screening, and they check, like, they want to know who everyone is, then it's a possibility that it's linked to you.
Yep, you find each other through DNA. So simple these days.
Right. It's so easy to do it. So I know a lot of clinics are just even moving forward with that and just encouraging donors to, you know, at least do 18, so that they can find out. And it's mostly just for health history, you know. If you're raising a child and you're nurturing a child, most of the time they're not gonna be like, well, you're my mom, because you're gonna be like, girl, no, you abort, no, you ain't.
And that's why I feel like, you know, the misconception. I know a lot of my family was like, oh, you're gonna have a kid out there, and I'm like, no, this is not my child. This is not mine. I have too many, so I'm okay.
Well, talk about your experience, like, just because now that you're saying that sharing it, like, how did people take? Because you seem like you were totally fine with it, but how did other people, your family members, take you wanting to donate your eggs?
Well, I can say, like, my family's very old school Caribbean, so they were very shocked. Like, why would you want to do that? And I was just like, you know, why not? I have a whole bunch of eggs I'm not going to use. I'm a very healthy girl. I know there's a lot of women that can't have kids. Why not? Like, that was always my response. Like, why not? And they were just like, what? Aren't you scared this is going to be your kid? That was the question I got a lot. Like, aren't you scared that they're going to try to dump this kid on you? And I'm like, no, I don't live in a fear-based mentality. So I'm just kind of like, no, it'll all work out. Everybody's going to, you know, if my embryo does help, if my egg does help somebody with a kid, then I doubt that they would try to drop that kid. It's one of those things where it's like, I feel like for a woman to go, or a family to go and go the IVF or the implantation route, they really want that child. They would really give that child all the love in the world, because they're essentially choosing that child. So I just try to reassure my family, like, it's all gonna be fine. But they were just very nervous, like, why would I do that?
Well, number one, they can't, because it's a contract. So you signed a contract saying, I am donating my eggs for compensation. I am not legally, you know, bounded to this. They can't do it anyway. So yes, nobody can come and drop off. If you decide to do egg donation, nobody can come and drop their baby off and say, you take it. There's a legal contract that you sign. There's a legal contract I had to sign. My partner had to sign as well. You know, when we received those eggs, that said, like, you know, legally we're just getting eggs for compensation. That's it. We're not getting anything else. And she signed the same contract saying, I'm legally giving my eggs. I'm legally getting compensation. I am relinquishing any rights to these things that I have. Right. So that's the basis of what both the contracts say. Do you know if any live births, or did the clinic tell you any live births from your eggs?
Not as of yet. I haven't heard of any live births. Granted, it's been we're basically September, so about 9 months since I've donated. So I'm not sure yet. I had about 30 eggs, and 24 were mature. So I guess we'll just have to wait and see. And
depending on the clinic, they may have done a lot of 7 or 8, and broke them down. So potentially 3 families could have gotten eggs, depending on how they break up the lot. And it's also dependent on the clinic, but a lot will do 7 to 8. So she had 24 mature eggs. They're going to divide those into 3 lots. And then either the parent can buy all 24 of those, or they may decide to do a lot of 8 or 16. It just depends on where the money resides. You wanted to talk about knowing your rights as an egg donor, talk about your experiences with the clinic itself. I know you said you had to initially do some ultrasounds. Now, did you live near the clinic? I did see like you flew and stuff like that. So
Yeah, so the clinic did fly me out because I was in Georgia at the time when I started the process. So they sent me to a local lab to get all my lab work done, and then I had like a family death, so I had to transition to New York, and they flew me from New York to San Francisco to do the donation. Um, I I can say like during my process it was very confusing at first because we were doing everything virtually. They were showing me how to do the injections virtually, and I wasn't doing it right, so it kind of messed up when it was time to donate. I ended up having to wait a couple of days, so I didn't realize how much time commitment you have to this process. If something goes wrong and you're not ready, if your eggs aren't mature enough to take, then you have to keep on the medication, and then that's wait a couple more days, and then if after a week they just they still trigger you anyway, and if no eggs are viable, then you're kind of on the hook for everything that you put in up to that date. So it was a lot that I didn't know that wasn't made clear to me. It's I found out after the fact that when I was leaving, I was asking for my medical records, and I found out after the fact that egg donors don't really have any rights to your medical records of the entire process. The only thing that they're going to give you, well, I can say at least in the state of California, the only thing that they're going to give you is the genetic testing, the genetic markers that you did that were already given to you through the third party services that they use for those testings. So you don't really have any right to know um, how the process went once you go under the anesthesiologist. You don't get a breakdown of your entire process. And Keisha, I will say it depends on the clinic. I really have a problem of when I'm doing stuff and I'm excited about stuff, I don't really read the contract. I'm just like, okay, this is what I want to do, and I just sign and I sign and I sign. And because I was so unhappy with my entire clinic process, I went back and I read the contract, and it's pretty much like if they have to trigger you and you're not able to donate any eggs, you don't have any viable eggs, you're on the hook for the hotel, the flights, the medication that they sent you. They'll send you a bill for all of that. So it's a high commitment, not just on time, because even though you might get compensation at the end, depending on the clinic and how fast they pay you out, if you get pregnant, or if because of your negligence you're not viable, then you're on the hook for that financially.
and I would imagine that they probably do that because, being an egg donor is more than just the compensation, as I shared. Is because I'm depending on you. I'm trusting you to read that calendar,
Yeah.
take your medication like you should, go to the appointments, show up on time, be responsible.
Right.
And what happens is I think a lot of people going through it thinking, you see all these ads get 5,000, 10,000, 15, up to 20,000, that, this, and then you realize you're having to go to appointment on day 1. You're having to go appointment on day 7. You're not responding. Now you have to increase your med dosage.
Yeah.
You go on day 9. You're still not responding to meds. So ultimately they may, say this is how many days you should go. But reality, if you're not taking the medications at the certain times that you're supposed to, just our bodies we know going through IVF and doing those kind of things that no matter how healthy you are and no matter how many babies you are, some people just don't respond to those meds.
And it's true. And me, I like how I was doing it through virtual. So she was showing me how to inject myself, and it turns out that I wasn't giving myself a full dose. So I was getting pieces of it. The eggs were growing. They just weren't growing at the rate they should have because I wasn't injecting the full dose. I wasn't injecting properly. And even in the middle of it, the nurse that I was working with, she ended up quitting, and I was just like, oh, this is a bad sign. This is a terrible sign. But at that point, you're already deep in, you're on the medication. So I'm like, okay, I'm going to see it through. But when I realized that they flew me out to San Francisco, and she's like, I don't know why you're not like your eggs aren't ready, like they're growing, but they're not the size they're supposed to grow. And I was just like, I don't know. I think they were probably like, she said they're supposed to be like a 1820 in size, like inches in size, and they were probably about like 7, 8. So they were halfway there, and I was on the medication for like 5, 7 days, and it just didn't make any sense. And I was showing her how I injected myself, and it turned out I just wasn't giving myself the full dose. So I can be devil's advocate into saying, like, you know, it is a costly process from the clinic that is doing this. So I understand why they're kind of like, if you're not taking it seriously, we're gonna have to give our compensation back.
Right. It's because from the back end, from my end, I'm putting up a lot of money. I'm trusting you to do what you're supposed to, because, you know, for my egg donor, I didn't know her. And I was between, and I always go back to choosing the right clinic, and I will still stand beside that even with the egg donation, choosing the right clinic. And I remember having my heart set on this one particular donor, and I was like, I really want her. You know, I had seen her before, and, you know, I had seen her on another database, and then I went to the actual clinic that she was, and I was like, I really want her. And my nurse was honest. She was like, don't pick her. And I said, you know, why? And she said, she's late to her appointments. We end up having to give her more medication. She's a great donor and she responds, but she doesn't, like, again, she doesn't take it seriously. And if you want it to be the one, you know, it's between two donors. And she said, I would go with the other one. I love her. She has a great spirit. When I'm talking to you, you know, she reminds me of you. And so I went with her, and she did wonderful. She did beautiful for me. And so, you know, trusting the doctors and nurses, because they're the ones who see the egg donors, not you. Sometimes you may want to ask for an opinion. Now, she didn't. She was like, now, if you want the other girl, like, you can. But I'm just telling you, if I had to pick, I would pick the other girl. Girl, say less. I picked the other girl.
You know, I don't blame you, because you're actually, you know, it always breaks down to, like, you're paying for a service. No matter if you're paying for like a pedicure, whatever, you're paying for a service, and you expect it to be done accurately, you know, with the care of just like, this is a lot of time and effort that I'm also putting in. So it's understandable. And for me, I have an IUD, so I didn't even know you could donate with like I had like a low hormonal one, and I didn't even know you could donate with an IUD in, but it is possible. It is possible.
Cool. Well, that's something that we didn't know. So there you go. I didn't know either, because
I was telling, they were like, are you on birth control? I was like, I have an IUD. And they're like, oh yeah, that's fine. That's perfect. I was like, oh, okay.
All right. Well, there y'all go. You can be an egg donor with the IUD. So we learned something new today. So when you got to the actual process, you flew out. They paid for your hotel. It seems like they paid for everything, compensation. Talk about your egg retrieval day.
Well, I can say, well, if you are going to donate your eggs, take the time. We have more than just Google these days. We have TikTok, we have Instagram. You know, TikTok and Google, where you can see live time people's experiences. I didn't do that deep research until after I was unhappy, and it all could have been avoided if I took the time. So if you are going to donate your eggs, I definitely do say take the time.
Okay.
When they did fly me out, say you fly out on a Monday, you go into the clinic that Monday, and they do an ultrasound. If you're all good to go, they give you all your medications to start triggering you, and your surgery day would be on a Wednesday. So by that Wednesday, you go through the surgery. I think the process took probably like 2 hours, if that. And you're fully out. They fully put you to sleep, and you kind of wake up back in your room, and that's it. They send you back to the hotel. They give you some pain medication, because not everybody feels that way, but I did have like really bad cramps, and I feel like the worst part about it was just coming out of the anesthesia. That was kind of the most out of me. I was a little groggy, and I was just very sleepy. So that was kind of the hardest. And then after that, you fly that very next day. So that Thursday, you can fly home that Thursday.
Okay, so you essentially, because you weren't in state,
Yeah.
you had like close to a week that you needed to take off, in addition to your ultrasounds and your blood work and your labs and stuff.
and then you have to take into consideration. In my case, I wasn't ready right away. And I had a death in the middle of me doing this process. So I was like, okay, I had went that Tuesday and I went through that Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. No, I went through that Monday process and they're like, okay, we're going to give you more medication. And if they're not growing by Wednesday, we're going to have to, no, it was Wednesday. Yeah, it was Wednesday, Thursday. And they're like, okay, if it's not growing, we're going to have to send you back home because I had to be back home for the funeral on Saturday. So I can say like, despite all the problems I did have with my clinic, they were very accommodating to my situation and they flew me back and forth. And luckily, when I did come back the day after, they flew me back for the funeral Saturday and I was back Sunday. And when they did flew me back, I was at the side that I was supposed to be at from the last week. So if you aren't ready, it could take a week or a week and a half too that you might have to take out of work, that you might have to take time for. So it's one of those things that you have to be very flexible with your time because you can't really gauge how much time you might have to spend. And even though they're supposed to pay for your hotel stay, you still have to have a card on file. And it also depends on how fast that clinic pays the hotel. You might be liable to pay for the room and they won't pay you back until they do your final payout. So I feel like a lot of times they have been marking as like, oh, it's no cost to the donor, but you might have to come out with initial costs starting. They only pay for Ubers to the clinic, the hotel, and back. So and the airport. So if you are there for a couple of days, and you're like, I just want to see scenery, or I just want to be out. If you're flying in, you do have to take into consideration that you're going to have to be paying for those things if you do want to do more than just sit in the hotel and just wait. So it is some cost that you can't think it's 100% free because you will have to come out with something.
You're right. It's definitely not 100% free because your time is not free. You're being compensated, but depending on how much time it is, sometimes it's not worth the compensation. So how much did they pay you to do the donation?
For the donation, they paid $5,000, and then because my clinic they weren't paying the hotel on time, I had to pay the hotel probably like $700 out of my own pocket, and then I got that back at the back end. So with this clinic, they only pay you after 90 days. So you have to wait 90 days to get the money back that you had put up front to pay for these things. And so I think at the end I probably got like 6,400 and change. And looking back, I honestly don't think it was worth it to do it with this clinic just because of all the things I had to go through during it. I just didn't think it was worth it to go with this clinic, and I kind of wanted to do it again, but I honestly feel like I have to take my time and just make sure I do the research. So I'm picking a good clinic that actually puts um, the donors needs like at the forefront, because I do feel like we also matter. It's a short period of time, yes, but I don't want to be. I really felt after the extraction, I really felt very like I hate to say it like this, but you sleep with somebody for the first time and then all they wanted was to sleep with you, and now they slept with you and they're like, okay, cool. That's how it felt like leaving the clinic, and then it was just no aftercare. I felt like everybody was more attentive up until I donated it, and then once I donated, it was just like, okay, cool. Do you have any bloating? Are you in any excruciating pain? No. Okay, yeah, you can go back home and go fly. Cool.
Right.
That was just kind of it. It was no aftercare of like, oh, did you check in 6 weeks later? Like, oh, did you check in with your doctor? Or how are you feeling? It was kind of like, okay, we're done.
And I definitely apologize for your experience in that, because it sounds like you were at a clinic that probably you weren't matched with the family. You were just like donating your eggs and they were just putting it probably in the database.
Yeah, they were just putting it in the database. I wasn't matched with the family. I think they have like 2 cycles a month where they just try to get as many eggs as they can and get it into the database. So I was a part of one of those cycles for the January month.
Which can be a little bit cold because there's nobody attached to it. So when I chose my clinic, and I think that you probably should contact my clinic. I'm just gonna say,
send the name.
Yeah. So when my clinic is in Utah, so I use Utah Fertility Center. They have all the egg donors. They have a database, And then, you know, sometimes they'll do, now they do test runs because they do eggs for donor egg bank. So sometimes they will try you as just frozen eggs just to see kind of how you respond before they really match you with a family. Probably because you are an egg donor before, they may just forgo that and just say, okay, we won't do frozen eggs. But for me,
they probably will, only because I did talk about like my medical records, and they did tell me while they won't share my records with me of the whole process, they will share it with another clinic if they were asking for like, okay, how did her eggs do in this cycle that you guys did? So the information is available to, I guess, the another clinic.
other clinic, yeah. And then they'll do the same thing. They'll have your profile up, and then they may just say, for me, they said, you know, they reached out to the donor, said, hey, are you, you know, ready to, are you willing to donate? We have a family that wants to match with you.
Mm-hmm.
So I matched with her, and then she started her cycle. Now I gave my donor a gift when it was all said and done. Yeah, I gave her a gift and just told her, like, you know, because of you, I'm able to become a mom. So, and then I just dropped it off at the clinic, and they gave it to her. They actually even called me and said, your donor was like so appreciative that you did that.
That is so sweet, because it's like, you know, it shows that you care, and like that you're like that you appreciate her, and that's very thoughtful.
And even though I don't know her name, I just wanted her to know that, you know, what you did for me. I was, you know, I think I said, like, thank you isn't enough.
Right.
You know, thank you isn't enough for that. So, you know, maybe you can do it with a clinic that is sort of like that, where you're just in the database. They call you and say, hey, we got somebody who wants to cycle you.
Yeah.
And then you can kind of decide, like, if you're ready or not, or, you know, because she told me they told me that she had I reached out and said I wanted to do her for May. And she said no, but she would do it for June if I was willing to wait. And I said yes. So having a clinic that's communicates well between the parties, the donor and the donor recipients, probably will make a difference in your next experience with doing egg donation. Because it sounds like the part of the egg donation was fine. It's just that you didn't like the clinic that you chose.
Yeah, I still believe in like egg donation, and I feel like it's still a beautiful process. I feel like I didn't choose the best clinic, and that's kind of where.
And what made you choose this clinic that you went to?
You know, I just was like, egg donations, and I just filled out a couple inquiries from like a bunch of different clinics. I just kind of went with the first one that responded to me, and again, that's why I'm very strong on use your resources of TikTok because. After the process, and I looked at everything, and I did use the resources I had of TikTok, and I saw a lot of people had the same experience I had. And I'm like, I could have avoided all of this if I took the time. So definitely take the time as a donor to just make sure you're picking the clinic that care, like, you know, like you said, like your clinic, they care about not just the recipient but also the donor. So that's very important.
Now, some donors go through what's called OHSS, where they're hypostimulated. They kind of have too many eggs sometimes, and then they feel bloated. Now, did you have any of those issues? Did you get any complications after your egg retrieval?
Man, I could tell you. I just got off Ozempic. I was like 140 pounds, and I was back to 160. And I was like, oh my God, I didn't know I was going to put back on all this weight. And I didn't know, like, after the process, I was super bloated. I looked probably about like 6 months pregnant for like 2 weeks. And you do have to be strong mentally because, you know, as a woman, you're like, okay, I got my body this way. And it's like, oh man, I didn't know that this was a part of it. So I didn't expect this. And I'm like, I was trying to squeeze myself into a waist trainer because I'm like, oh no, like I'm trying to help myself go down, when you just kind of have to let your body just get back to its regular cycle and just get back to itself slowly. I think after about like 3 weeks, maybe a month, I was back, like all the bloating was away, and I was fine, but it didn't really affect like my menstrual or anything. Everything was still the same. So.
Okay, that was the next question I was going to have you, but because I know you're on the IUD, but did you have any menstrual problems or anything after that?
No, after the process because I had such a terrible experience with the clinic. I went right to my OBGYN and I'm like, I want to make sure that the IUDs is still in the same place. I want to make sure everything's good. And they're like, oh yeah, everything's perfectly fine. So um, everything for me was fine. The IUD didn't really affect it. I think they kind of just went around it and used the vacuum, so it was fine.
Okay, good. Because you can run into and we say this all the time. Again, I'm a broken record when it says that. It depends on your clinic. Your clinic is going to be determined on how they simulate you. It's a liability for them if they, overstim. So, as an attendant parent, there's a line that needs to be done. You do want as many eggs as possible, but we also want to make sure that Shantel has a life to live after this. So she has children, she may have a partner, she may have different things, and so we don't want to put her in a situation where it's dangerous, where we're trying to get all these eggs from her and now she's bloated or she has to go to the hospital or she has to spend more time off than she needs to. So as much as we want to get as many eggs, because again, that's the many chances, we also still need to keep in mind that, I've been in groups and they'll say, oh, well, she needs to do X, Y, and Z. And I've said in both, she's a human being. Like this is a person. This is not just like, if she says like, I can't believe she said no, I can't believe this. This is a person with real feelings that you're getting something from. Let's be mindful of that and not, be in danger or I've seen them like, well, they only got, this many eggs and they only got that. And I'm like, again, they still have to be mindful and careful of this is a real live person that they're getting eggs from.
It also depends on how many times they've donated. Because I know some places they like, depending on the state chat, there's a limit that you can only donate. I think with that clinic, they're like, you can only donate about 4 times because they don't want to overstimulate you where you're having too much medication and you trying to get all these eggs to donate. So it's definitely limitations.
Yes, definitely limitations to it, and it's definitely some women go on to have their own children. It's perfectly safe that if you do donate your eggs, you're not giving away all your eggs. A lot of women go on to have their own children. Some people don't want to have any more children, so that's the reason why they donate. That's why Tell did it, but you can't go on to having kids.
I was because my son was asking me about. He's like, "Oh, what are you gonna do?" I'm like, "I'm gonna talk about I donated my eggs," and he was just like, "Oh, what's that?" And I'm like, as a woman, you're born with as you're creating your mother's stomach, you have all the eggs you'll ever have in your life.
Right.
So they're not doing anything but going away, right? Really, just deteriorating. So I'm like, if you have healthy eggs, why not? Because either way, the older you get, the quality of them goes down anyway. So you might as well get them out while they're young and fresh.
Yes, and that's correct. So you are born with all the eggs that you have. So once you have a cycle, that's it. Those eggs are gone. Is basically how it works. And then as you keep going, you get older. The less as you have, and then that's why some women, go into menopause early or different things like that because they don't have like a lot of egg reserve. So that's important to know. In case anybody is walking in, this is Shantel. She is an egg donor. She donated her eggs to a clinic. She enjoyed the experience of being an egg donor. She just didn't like the clinic itself. And so that's what we're saying. Be mindful. Do your research. Always do your research. That's even if you're a egg donor recipient. I say it all goes down to your level of care. Either way, in seeing that clinic, listening to the reviews, seeing what people have. Now, I actually know your personal clinic. And so when you were telling me this, I immediately said which it was. And you were like, girl, how you know? I was like, well, we had a couple of egg donors that had the same feelings as you did, which is an unfortunate situation because we definitely need more women of color donating. Now, I want to know for you that you've done the experience and know we're not the clinic, but do you encourage your circle? Do you encourage women around you now that you've done it to donate your eggs?
I always tell women around me, I'm like, do it. If you feel like you want to help another woman, go for it. Like, what is, other than the time commitment, which I do feel like if you manage it properly, it can be done around your regular schedule. You should. Like I always tell everybody, why not? Why not? I was even thinking about being a surrogate, but I was just like, that's a big commitment of just 9 months. So
That's a sentence right there.
yeah, I was like, that's 9 months, like 9 months. That's I didn't think about nothing else. I was just like 9 months.
That's,
Like that's a long time.
listen, nine, yeah, it's a long time.
So I'm like, it's always I tell people all the time, like, it's good to help women. You never know people's situation, and if you can, why not?
Exactly. So if anybody wants to ask any questions, I know we've seen some things. It sounds like you stemmed for about 9 days.
Yeah.
Witness about 9 days. So
About,
9 days,
yeah, I would say about because I'm like,
9 or 11.
yeah, I think it's probably about like 9 or 11.
Okay. In retrospective, that's really not that bad. So,
It's really not because I'm like, even when you're taking the IVF medication, like you're taking it at night, so it's not like it's taking up much of your time up until you get there to donate. So that's kind of where the block of time really chunks in. Is just when you get there, is this only 3-4 days commitment of real time? This is my 100% focus, or is it longer because my eggs weren't ready? So that's kind of where I feel like the time may affect you the most. Just like, okay, I'm here at this clinic, or I have to make sure I'm available for this clinic to do ultrasounds to make sure that my eggs are ready. So that's where the kind of the block of time comes in at during like the actual retrieval stage.
right, right. But your average time doing IVF, if your eggs are healthy and everything, most of them stem between, most of them have their egg retrievals between like not day 9. And then, sometimes they'll go to like 11 or 12. And again, it just depends on how you're responding to the meds. I think that mine triggered on day 9 of her egg retrieval, and I got updates. So I got when she went to baseline, I got when she got her next update, how many follicles they saw at that time. So I got her baseline follicles, she had 60. And then, of course, by the time it got to retrieval day, she had I got 25 mature eggs.
Okay.
But they gave me a timeline. They broke it down. They was like, hey, your donor is in here. Estrogen looks, they told me what her estrogen was. They told me what her progesterone levels were. And then they said how many about follicles they saw. And then they said, tonight your donor is triggering. We'll give you a call the next day. So then I got, you got 25 eggs. They fertilized those. And then the next day I got a call saying, this is how many fertilized. And then it said, I got a call at day 5.
Okay.
Is how mine particularly worked. So yours was just, you got 24 eggs and then they'll just match them later, but they'll get the same thing. So for you, if you're doing it with the frozen egg kind of situation, which is what Shantel did, they're going to say you got a lot of 8 eggs when they, all eggs don't survive the thaw. So they'll say you got 8 eggs, maybe 7 of them survive the thaw. So now I've lost like 1 egg. And then they'll say out of the 7 eggs, maybe 6 fertilized. And then they'll say how many you have from day 5 from there. So everything you donate may not survive the thaw. And that's why we recommend, if you're going to do egg donation, to freeze embryos and not just get eggs, because eggs are more fragile. They hold more water.
Okay.
And so that's when they don't survive the thaw. They just, and it's really nothing you did wrong or anything like that. It's just, it didn't survive. They can't use it. And it's a tough pill to swallow on the end of the person paying for it.
I do have a question though. So if you buy a lot of 6 and you don't know if they thaw out and they survive until after you purchase them.
You don't know.
Oh wow. Oh wow. So it's really a big commitment. Wow. You don't know.
That's why we listen. I will give you all my flowers.
Yeah. I'm like, that's a hefty price to just not to take a chance.
Yeah, and I mean, some clinics, truthfully and honestly, will say, "Sorry, like that's it." So you have to start over. We get a lot of devastating news that I got a lot of 7 or 8 eggs. I got one embryo. We've had people have replacement lots because things have happened. So it's taxing on both ends. And that's why choosing the right place to be to help mitigate those things is always helpful. So if anybody has any questions that they want to drop, maybe you are considering egg donation, the first thing that you would need to do is, I would say, go to your local clinic. That will keep it from being as not wasting your time, but just like not taking too much of your time up. Because if you get to the clinic,
when you're traveling on like
right,
8-hour flight, I took that like I think a 7-hour flight to California from New York, and then to San Francisco to New York, and then back 2 days later, and then 2 days after that going back. So it's that's kind of the back and forth. I would definitely probably go to a local clinic or somewhere I can drive to, like this a state over, versus going so far out. If I do it again, though.
and I would also say read your contract too.
Yeah.
And make sure that you know exactly when you're getting paid. Now, some clinics pay you right after your egg donation, because I had to give a check for mine before she cycled. I had to give a check for $5,000, and when they did her retrieval, she then got her check. Like, she walked out with her check.
Yeah, that's why I'm like, to take the time out to really research the clinic, because some places they do pay, they'll give you like half of the compensation once you start the medication. So it's like, okay, this is a big commitment. You start the medication, and then you get the rest. So it really just varies from clinic to clinic.
Right. So definitely do your research when you're looking for one. So someone said, do you have any regrets with your donation?
Honestly, other than the clinic, no. I definitely feel like I made the right decision. I did it for the right reasons. I just feel like I should have just took more time and picked a better place.
Now, as far as connection, so I always talked about people and connections, with the egg, with them having donor eggs. I'm going to talk about it the opposite way, is saying, like, you've donated your eggs. Is there do you have any emotional attachment to donating them? Like, do you think, because I know you said your family said, you're gonna have babies out there.
That's everybody's concern. And to me, I'm like, I don't really have an emotional connection, because I personally, like, even having my kids, I personally didn't even really have a connection to them until after they were born, and it's only because it's just like it's taxing to carry a baby and then go through delivery and go through all these things. So until I delivered a baby and I was like free, and it's funny, like me, I didn't even do they're like, skin to skin. I'm like, no, you give it to the dad, please. I need some water. I need some food. My hands are shaking. I'm nervous. It's so I don't think I would ever have an attachment. I'm just like, oh, that's really cool. Like, to see that this is what came about. If somebody came in, they're like, oh, you're the donor that my mom was able to conceive with, and I'm like, oh my god, you're a person. I think
Right.
that would just really be like a cool factor to me. Like, oh my god, you're actually a person.
Right.
Amazing. Like, science is amazing. But emotionally, I wouldn't have any attachment. I would just think this is just a blessing. Like, wow, that's great.
And I'm glad you said that, because a lot of people think, DNA is what makes a connection. And I'm glad that you're saying that, listen, I know they were my DNA and I didn't immediately bond, or I didn't have these warm and fuzzy feelings during my pregnancy, because I tell them that all the time. I'm like, just because you naturally have a child does not mean you're going to naturally bond with them. It's just something that, takes time. A lot of women go into severe depression after they have children, that they didn't know. So, seeking therapy sometimes helps, even sometimes being on medication helps, with that. But there's no guarantee, DNA or not, that you're going to bond with your child.
And it's one of those things where it's like, I feel like the only time you really choose a child is when you're a recipient, or like you're trying to go the IVF route. Like, you're choosing to be a parent at this point. Sometimes, a lot of people have kids and they're not really choosing; they just have kids. And I feel like we all handle these things a lot differently, and we just have to give people a lot of grace, because just because you had a child doesn't make you a good mother or a good parent. So it just all depends.
Well, I appreciate you coming in. If there are no other further questions for Shantel, I want to thank you for sitting down and taking the time to talk with us.
Well, thank you for having me. I definitely appreciate this, and it's a beautiful thing that you're doing, trying to build a community for like for people who want to have children have to go this route. So it's definitely amazing that we have the community.
I want people also to, I talk about this side because this is the side I'm on, but I want also people to know that you can definitely, help and bless a family, in the same point, get compensated for it. You can do both. And, the disparity that we have is finding someone who looks like or resembles, or even just someone who is AA, or, we've had Filipinos on here, Filipino girl on here, and she was like finding that, and, Chinese American, like just finding somebody culturally based as you is a hard part. And if we don't raise the awareness of, you coming on and saying, these are my experiences, would I do it again? Yes. Would I necessarily pick that clinic again? No. And here are the reasons why.
Right.
Because it's not a scary thing. You can go on to have other children. You can, it doesn't have to be dangerous.
Like, it's healthy. Like, you'll be fine after. It's the moment.
Right. But you have to do your due diligence. We talk about it on, and I love that you saying this too, because I talk about your care and being, advocating for yourself. And even as an egg donor or a surrogate, you need to advocate for yourself, your health, your safety, because that's going to be important. This is your life that you are dealing with. And so you have to deal with the ramifications afterwards when it comes to doing something that, is a heavy decision. That's what people don't understand. This is definitely a heavy decision. And you do have to wonder, like, what if somebody shows up at your door? Are you prepared for that?
Right.
Are you prepared to ask the questions? Are you prepared to know those things? Truth to be honest, in this community, we just don't have much data when it comes to how these children are going to react when they find out that they're donor conceived, and what feelings they're going to have. We just don't have a lot of those things. Building this community now gives them the chance to say, hey, I have a friend, my mom has a friend who's donor conceived. My mom has a friend who donated her eggs. My mom has a friend who's a surrogate. And so we're building this safety community. So now that it just feels like it's normal. It doesn't feel like this is a big, huge secret and taboo. Because other non-melanated people talk about this all the time. We don't.
There's definitely a gap in our community for that, for sure.
Right. And you're saying, you're Caribbean. That's just the culture. And so educating people about what this truly means only just makes it say, oh, well, such and such did the same thing too. And it's just like getting a kidney or anything else. I have to let people know that what you gave was not a child. What you gave was tissue.
Yeah.
Because as I told you, if they get a lot of those 8 eggs, 1 may not survive the thaw. 2 may not survive the thaw. That's not a baby.
That might not make it.
Listen, and they may only get 1.
Right.
They may not even get a live birth. So you're not giving children away. You're giving tissue away, is what it is. And that doesn't necessarily mean that that's a baby. That couple could potentially start over. We hope that they don't, but that is the reality that we face.
Yeah.
Well, if there are no other questions, we're going to thank Shantel for her time. I'm going to try to get more egg donors on to talk about their experience. If you are an egg donor and you see this video and you want to, contact me, I'm available. If you see me around just on TikTok, if you're on the For You page and you didn't quite step in, but you just enjoyed the conversation, definitely DM me. Definitely want to do more conversations with egg donors of all shades, black and brown, so they can just talk about their experiences more than once. If they've done it more than one time, I think that's all of those different perspectives gives you the proper education to want to become an egg donor. So hopefully you speaking up, because your page isn't a huge page,
a little one now.
It's not a huge page, but it's a page where I was like, let me just try. She gonna say yes or no.
Right. It's like
And
I'm happy definitely to give my insight and share my experience.
yeah. So you see her, pick her up, y'all. We ended up at 15K likes. I appreciate y'all all for the taps. I appreciate all the questions that you guys asked. You know, and again, I thank you so much for Shantel for sharing your journey. And you know, just the real honesty of what it is. And what we've learned is it's rewarding. Pick the right clinic. It's not easy. And sometimes, like you said, you do all this and it's like, is it really worth all the money, you know, that you think that you're going to get? So pick a clinic that does good compensation for you, and they respect your time, and they don't make you feel like a number.
Yeah.
And I think that's really what the most important thing, because even on this side, I have left clinics because I felt like I was just a number. I felt like, you know, if I got pregnant or I didn't get pregnant, it really didn't matter to them. Just make sure I paid my money, you know, that situation.
Yeah.
You know, and I mean, it's a lot of money. And even with you, it's a lot of time commitment. So
you want to be treated like a person.
You want to be treated like a person.
Yeah.
That's what I said. Listen, we're not running a gamut. These are human beings.
Yeah, these are people.
And 30 eggs is still a whole lot. That means that you have good egg quality. And then 24 more mature. To be a first time donor, I would have been ecstatic. Like if I didn't know like we got 24 eggs, I would have been like, okay, my baby in there somewhere. My baby in there somewhere. So I'm going to drop you down.
All right, thank
Always
you.
come and visit whenever.
I'm glad to help. All right, have a good night.
You too.